Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I'm out for the day. I had a family emergency, but I just wanted to leave you with some words of wisdom on the causes of the French Revolution today. So if you could take out the notes packet that we've been working, or that I gave you on the French Revolution, today's notes that you're going to be getting will guide you through that packet. So I want to make sure that you have that out. So I'll give you a minute to take that out. Or you can pause this for a moment. This probably makes more sense. All right, so the French Revolution, what I want to focus on today are the causes of the French Revolution and the situation of France beforehand. So what you know already, what we discussed in the past, was why the French Revolution was not was inevitable in France, or not inevitable, but why it was beginning in France and not in other nations. Why the enlightened despots were able to make reforms in Europe, Prussia, and Austria, and Russia, but not in France. And the big problem for that was money. And France was an increasingly wealthy state, but the money was not going to the government of France, and as a result, they were at a loss there. In addition to that, we also have the ideas of the Enlightenment really playing a large role in the French Revolution because it changed the mindset of the people. And just a few years prior was the American Revolution. And not only did the financial aid that was provided from the French, along with the military aid that the French provided to the American rebels, if you would, that helped spark it, but it also provided a groundwork for this notion of a revolution against a government. Now, the French Revolution is the one that's given all the credit around the world for a future revolution, and that's because it was so much more revolutionary. You studied the American Revolution last year, but the American Revolution certainly served as a platform to show the ideas of the Enlightenment in action, and it gave the people of France another cause. Something I'm going to ask that you do as you're taking notes today is to keep a space on the right-hand column or left-hand column, wherever you want, for questions. So that way, as you're writing, just if you have any questions, just feel free to write them down as we go. And then tomorrow in class, I'll ask you, did you have any questions that came about during the podcast? And you can write them down there. All right, so to really kick off this, let's talk about the old regime. So French society was organized into three estates. The first being the clergy, and there was an upper clergy and a lower clergy. And the upper clergy, the bishops, were really the ones with the most power. And then the lower clergy members were just your town and village priests. Many of them actually had great sympathy for the Third Estate. And when we talk about the stages of the French Revolution, that's the clergy members were first really a part of the revolution themselves, the lower clergy. The upper clergy were one with the nobility. There's a divide there. But when we look at these estates and talk about how they vote, they're certainly voting with the elite, with that elite group. And they have quite a few privileges there. The second estate is that resurgent nobility. They're both the nobles of the sword and nobles of the robe, but these are the nobility who are trying to reclaim a bit more power after Louis XIV. They're taking over those parlements, the court system, and they're trying to limit the power of both Louis XV and then his son Louis XVI. What they have above everything else is exemption from taxes. They do not have to pay the land tax, the taille. They don't have to pay the vingtième, that 5% tax that every French person had to pay, nor did they have to pay for the corvée, or the forced labor, that the Third Estate was expected to give them. So that first and second estate, they lived a life of exemption, and there was really a lot of privilege. The Third Estate was 97.5% of the population. They are composed of the commercial and professional class, wage earners, and farmers and peasants. Now, the wage earners, those are your urban workers. They're also known sometimes as the sans-culottes, those who work in the cities. Those wage earners are really hurt because at this point in French history, the prices of goods are constantly increasing in price, but wages are not reflecting those higher costs of living. If you're a peasant or a farmer, you're sort of you're an individual living or a tenant, you're owing obligations and dues to your lord, and those are all burdensome. But at least you have your food, your day-to-day food. You're not using money for. You're growing. These urban dwellers, they're totally dependent on the price of grain for their price of food every day. It becomes really, really burdensome. Now, in terms of social factors and increasing poverty, if you look, one of the big sources of suffering for peasantry is this resurgent nobility. As they're trying to take more power for themselves, these nobles, they're going to be imposing new feudal dues and heavily taxing the peasants. And between 1788 and 1789, there's a really poor harvest, which means that the price of bread is going to be going up, which means that there's going to be bread riots, including in the cities, particularly among those wage earners. So bread riots and protesting in the street, those are not out of the norm for the people of France. So when those begin in the French Revolution, it's not shocking. Those have been happening fairly regularly throughout French history. The resurgent nobility are some of the things that they do in terms of taxes and fees charged to the peasants. They're charging the peasants a certain percentage of the crops. They also are preventing them to have the right to hunt on their land without a fee. And in addition to all of that, they also have a corvée, or this mandated labor for the nobles. Now, in addition to all of that, you also have the, so you can see here on the source, the proportion of the wages that urban workers had to spend to buy bread in August versus July. I mean, you can really see how it fluctuates and how increased it is. I mean, 75% of your wage to just buy bread, that's really too much. So that becomes a big part of the issue. Now, there's a lot of growing tensions, even made worse by the financial crisis. The king is constantly getting into really high debt. Now, there's one group that has an interest in the king's money because they want a good credit base for their country, and that would be that bourgeois class. So in the Third Estate, there's this other group at the very top that are the leaders of the revolution. They're known as the bourgeoisie. These leaders of the revolution, they're professors, they're an educated class like lawyers, and what they want in particular are social and a political structure that better reflects the economic reality. These are the men who have a lot of wealth and a lot of power, these bourgeoisie, and they are not getting the privileges that they want to have. They're also looking for a much more efficient government. They're looking for more prosperity and no trade restrictions, and they're looking for just a better political influence. They're looking to lower some taxes, equalize land tax, and ultimately undermine the aristocrats. Now, Louis XV and Louis XVI are both trying to do things to address their financial crisis, their financial situation. So, as we can go back to this challenge. The king is spending way more than he's taking in, and the government's debt is constantly fluctuating. Now, Turgot, who was the economic minister originally for Louis XV, is trying to reform the economy based on Enlightenment ideas, but each of his sort of reforms gets really shot down by both nobility and the bourgeois. He tries to cut expenses and lowering the deficit, increasing credit by 1775. He also tries to abolish price controls, which leads to free trade in grain, but with the poor harvest, without those price controls, the price of bread, of course, shoots up, and then you have the riots breaking out. It's also, his reforms are being opposed by the craft guilds, who still have a lot of political clout and a lot of power in the cities. And he's starting to replace some of the mandated labor with a tax, with actual financial tax instead. So if a peasant does not have a lot of money, then switching from labor to a money-based tax for those corvées become even more burdensome. Now, when Turgot was asked to be stepped down, we have in his replacement a man named Jacques Necker. And Jacques Necker is also attempting to try and fix these problems. What he ends up doing is he's calling an Estates General. And what this is a way to, for the king, he's trying to find a way to get approval for taxes. So what he first does is he calls for an assembly of notables, which is a way to try and get the nobility and the church to agree to become taxed. Now, they reject, however, the economic reforms. So here you can see the assembly of nobles. It says, "Dear objects of my care, I have assembled you to ascertain what sauce you want to be eaten." And they say, "Well, we don't want to be eaten at all." And so you're departing from the question, right? So this is clearly a failure, right? If you're given the option of paying taxes, you're going to say, we don't want them. So this Estates General becomes the second choice, the second resort. And the nobility are hoping to use this as a means of increasing their power. They're still part of this resurgent nobility. They're looking at this as yet another opportunity for them to increase their power. They're trying to make it a new modern body that they can use then to manipulate. Now, each group has their own goals, and each group only has one vote as a group. So your nobility, the second estate, they are looking to maintain their power and increase their power in any way and to prevent any additional taxes. The clergy as well are looking to maintain their clout. This third estate, what they really want are the peasants want more traditional landowning rights again. The changes because of this resurgent nobility meant that they've lost a lot of privileges that they had over their land. So the peasants want those traditional landowning rights again, eliminating the corvée as a financial burden rather than just labor burden. Artisans are going to want more economic regulation and control over the grain trade again. They actually want more government involvement in their economy because they want to have those price controls as wage earners. And the bourgeois are really looking for equal treatment to the nobility. All of these things are leading to this Estates General, which is a bundle of challenges. This enters us into the very first phase of the revolution, which is called the moderate phase. So at the Estates General, each group was invited to bring a cahier de doléances, cahier, C-A-H-I-E-R-S, de doléances. And what it was a list of grievances. And so in this list of grievances, one man, Abbé Sieyès, says, questions, what is the third estate? Everything. What has it been until now in the political order? Nothing. What does it ask to become? Something. This is by Abbé Sieyès, and really what he's calling for there is he's pointing out that the nobility is a useless caste, which could be abolished really without loss, right? We could completely eliminate the nobility without any real loss. But the third estate, they're the ones who are truly necessary, and they are really the one that represents the nation, and the nation itself is the power. And so at this Estates General, when they meet, they're each only given one vote as a group. However, they're not given any real additional power. So at this Estates General, each estate ultimately is given one vote. So they come in, they send their representatives. Now, in the preparation for this Estates General, it had not been met since before Louis XIV. So it's been a long time since we've had an Estates General, and it's this question of, how should we organize it? How should it be laid out? Who should plan it? And what they end up deciding is to grant more representation for the bourgeois members, the bourgeois class. However, the bourgeois class itself still only gets one vote. So you have twice the number of people with still the same number of votes. And that causes a real challenge. And that's what really ultimately angers the third estate. So these three estates, they meet, they discuss, they convene. They also then break off into these separate sessions. And at those separate sessions, they're calling for more reforms and calling for more demands. And Louis XIV is actually going to be starting to break away. And 3 days later, they find themselves locked out of their room on June 17, 1789. The room that they've been meeting in, Louis XVI has closed. So in order to continue to meet, they end up running to a tennis court, and they take an oath on June 20th, 1789, that declares that they will not disband until they form a constitution. This is called the Tennis Court Oath. Now, Louis XVI's response is that the king wishes that in the ancient distinction of those three orders of the state be preserved in its entirety, as essentially linked to the constitution of his kingdom, that the deputies freely elected by each of the three orders, forming three chambers, deliberated by the order, can be considered as forming the body of the representatives of the nation. As a result, the king has declared null the resolutions passed by the deputies of the Order of the Third Estate, the 17th of this month, as well as those which should follow them, as illegal and unconstitutional. What Louis XVI really ends up doing there is he's really scolding the deputies and calling in the troops. He ends up sending 18,000 soldiers to Versailles, and he ends up firing Jacques Necker as well, who's calling for some reforms on behalf of the Third Estate. Meanwhile, in Paris at this time, the economic situation in Paris for the peasants is just getting worse. The harvest failure is increasing the bread price. The towns are starting to begin to fear that the municipalities are going to grow really crowded with beggars. So upper third estates and towns begin to collect weapons for protection. They start taking over city governments and setting up national guards for self-protection because the situation for the peasants is just so poor. Sans-culottes are these working class men and women who are really united by a common fear of famine and shortages. There's a group there called Jacobins, which is a radical group, and they'll become even more radical at the actual National Assembly, who are going to be getting support from these sans-culottes. 1 in 8 of the sans-culottes are in poverty in Paris. In Paris, 1 in 8 people are in poverty. 150,000 people of the 600,000 in Paris are unemployed. So this is a time when in Paris you have just lots of poverty within the walls, and also this fear of outside invasion coming in and really ruining everything for the people who are living there. So it's just a period of arming people willing to fight against your own neighbors because it's such an unsteady situation. This is all going to come to a head on July 14th, 1789, where armed Third Estate members assault the Bastille. They attack. They end up having. There's 15 cannons at the Bastille, 200,000 pounds of gunpowder, dozens of guns, and only 7 prisoners. The result is ultimately a dismantling of this building. This building, the Bastille itself, was used as a prison. It was also used as sort of an armory in Paris, and it's a symbol of the old regime. The cannons of the Bastille pointed downward at the people of Paris. It was not used as a protection for the people, it was used as a protection against the people. And so when they dismantled it brick by brick on July 14th, 1789, it's really a symbolic moment where they're claiming that power, that they're above. Now, what this also does is it really releases the press to be free within Paris. And you see the rise of a lot of propaganda pro-revolution at this moment. Now, Louis XVI visits Paris on July 17, 1789. Following the fall of the Bastille and the establishment of a new revolutionary municipal government of Paris, the king came to Paris to meet the government on the steps of Hôtel de Ville, where he accepted the tricolor and of the revolution. So he's actually adopting some of these ideas very early on. I mean, July 14th, 3 days later, Louis XVI is right there with everyone. So Louis XVI does indeed recognize the Paris Commune and the National Assembly and agrees to withdraw troops. So he's starting to capitulate to some of these needs. It's at this moment, too, that we have the very first National Guard formed in Paris, and it's led by Marquis de Lafayette, the man who went to the American Revolution, and he's considered as a result the hero of two worlds, both the hero of the American Revolution and the hero of the French. Now the bourgeoisie, he's a bourgeois member. He's wealthy. He's actually a noble, but it's the guard that's designed to help keep the peace. Now, they are the ones who truly adopt that tricolor, which Louis XVI agrees to adopt and put on, which means that they're wearing red, white, and blue. The red is symbolizing, the red and blue are symbols of Paris, and the white is the symbol of the House of Bourbon. So it's really a symbolism of the unification of the people of Paris and the House of Bourbon. Now, in the countryside, it's this summer of 1789 where you have this widespread fear and panic. It's called the Great Fear. The peasants at this time are really afraid that brigands are coming to seize their crops. Any outsiders are coming in to take away their crops. There's such limited supply in the first place. And they had been really hopeful and very aware of the political situation since the Cahiers, right? They helped write notebooks of grievances, things that they were hoping to reform. So they were aware that things were happening, that changes were in store. And then they heard rumors of Necker's dismissal, the storming of the Bastille, and all of a sudden they realized they might not be safe anymore. And so what happens is there's a true agrarian insurrection where they set fire to all the manors' homes, the manorial homes. And when the homes are on fire, the old serf obligations, those ties to the land, also the feudal obligations get blown in smoke, and the peasants in the countryside are really starting to spread fear everywhere. Now, on the 4th of August, 1789, you have the abolishment of feudal privileges, and this is one of the first acts of the National Assembly. In addition to that, they published the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen in the same summer of 1789. During this phase of the revolution, this moderate phase, Frenchmen are being guaranteed certain rights that are really similar to those secured in both the English Revolution, the English Civil War, and the American Revolution. Some of the social reforms that are being given is to be able to abolish those feudal privileges, giving still fees to the lords, but serfdom, personal servitude is getting abolished, and the tithes and tax privileges of the nobility are also abolished. So this gives the peasant class a lot more clout. Now, in the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, some of the principles that are issued there on August 26, 1789 include the concept that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. There's guaranteed certain natural rights such as liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Liberty is getting defined as freedom to do anything not injurious to others, any kind of limits set by the law. There's the freedom of thought and of religion. Due process in matters of arrest and agreement and punishment. Limits on taxing and authority. Equality of all before the law. Law as an expression of the general will. The idea that the sovereign, or the person in power of the nation itself, has to respond to the needs of the people, and that these public officials are agents of the nation, that they're serving the people. And also finally a separation of powers. Now, in terms of religious changes, there ends up being this civil constitution of the clergy. And it's in the civil constitution of the clergy that Palmer really states that the revolutionaries regarded the church as a form of public authority and as such subordinate to the sovereign power. But in the civil constitution of the clergy, it establishes the election of parish priests and bishops. The clergy are now going to be getting their salaries from the state, and the French clergy have to swear an oath of loyalty to the Constitution. And so those who refuse are considered to be refractory clergy. And so they're the ones who are going to be ignoring these reforms. In November of 1789, the National Assembly confiscates church properties and dissolves any of the monastic orders. The Pope immediately condemns this, and it leads to a division within the clergy between those who are joining the revolution and those who are still abiding by the Pope. It's during this time as well in the civil constitution of the clergy that the civil rights of Jews are also going to be recognized. I enjoy looking at this cartoon for the civil constitution of the clergy. It's called the Dégraisseur Patriote. So what you're seeing is there's like the defatter, the patriotic defatter. What you're seeing is a process where the priests are going into the squeeze, and they're getting squeezed, and the fat is coming out, but the fat is all the excess wealth, and they're walking off very thin. Now, in terms of economic changes, the economic changes are really appealing to that new middle class, which is favoring the middle class over the lower class. There's an assumption of the old regime debts, a confiscation of church properties, and also for economic individualism, there's really an elimination of regulations on wages and of prices. The guilds are going to be abolished gradually, first with the Le Chapelier laws of 1791, which reestablished the abolition of campagnards and banning any kind of guilds or strikes, and all trades will be open to all. Now, by September of 1789, the leadership within the assembly is starting to fall apart in that National Assembly. Some people in there really want to give a strong veto power for the king, and others want to really delay the veto power in order to give more power to the assembly itself. Many aristocrats by this point are really starting to get really frightened by the government reforms, are leaving France, and they get the title of being an émigré. Emigres are really counter-revolutionary. They want to stop the revolution, and they start spreading a lot of rumors and propaganda, anti-revolutionary messages. And they really want to restore the old regime and all their old privileges. They're seeking a lot of additional help from other countries in Europe. Between October 4th and 5th of 1789, a crowd of women who are really suffering, looking for food, decide to go to Versailles. And when they surround Versailles on this march to Versailles, it's called the Women's March to Versailles, originally they're making demands for bread, but while they're there, they end up chanting and demanding that Louis XVI and his wife and children return with them back to Paris. This really forces a change upon the National Assembly, which until this time had been still meeting in Versailles. So at this point, Louis XVI is forced to move to Tuileries in Paris, and the assembly is moving there too. Many of the conservative revolutionaries in the National Assembly are starting to drop out because they really fear its demise. Those who do stay are the ones who, at this point, Paris is the epicenter. And what happens is more of the conservatives in the National Assembly are dropping out. So who remains are but the more radical. And we start to see one group, the Jacobins, who I've already mentioned once before. But they really are one example of a few clubs or social groups that also become political venues. And so here you see in this image the Jacobins Club. It's the Society of Friends of the Constitution. Most clubs are made up of middle class and are places where people can talk freely about their wants, their desires, their wishes. The Jacobins really begin the radical minority who want to abolish the monarchy altogether and set up a republic with universal suffrage. All of this is coming to a head, so by 1791 they end up setting up the Constitution of 1791, which is pretty much a constitutional monarchy, a limited monarchy. In terms of local government, there's an elimination of overlapping jurisdictions and layers of local and provincial bureaucracy, law, custom, tariffs, and other forms of special privileges. There's a creation now of 83 equal departments across all of France. So rather than these different overlaps, they've really reorganized, and they're called departments or arrondissements. There's also the election of local officials that have a lot more decentralization as a way of resisting against the absolutism that had been set up prior. The national government itself is a really weak government. It's a weak executive. The king, the only thing he has as a power is a veto power. It's a unicameral legislative assembly that's indirectly elected by property owners exclusively. And so they're considered those active citizens, as you can see. And then there's this other group called passive citizens. They're the ones who are by far the majority of the population. They are non-landowning men or women as well. But both have the same civil rights, active and passive citizens. But active citizens are the only ones who can vote on electors, and in turn also for the national legislature. The active citizens are males over 25 who can pay a small tax, and men paying a high tax qualified as electors themselves. So there's this very limited structure within the government that limits who can do what. So here you can see the arrondissements, those different provinces. I'm going to stop here for right now. Tomorrow we'll pick up with the rights of women and the transition in the National Assembly. But I want to just pause here. I'm going to give you a chance to look over these notes, sort of check out with one another, sort of go over anything that you might still have gaps on, and discuss any questions that you'd like to have for tomorrow. Once again, my apologies for the absence, but I'll let you all know, hopefully good news. All right, take care. Have a good day. Bye.